At the end of World War II, a group of Soviet soldiers trapped in a German concentration camp created a miracle. They not only stole a German bomber to successfully break out and escape back to their motherland, but they also brought back the design blueprints for the German Army's top-secret V-2 missile. On July 13, 1944, Soviet pilot Devyatayev and his comrades were on a flight patrol mission when they unexpectedly discovered a German Heinkel He 11-1 bomber escorted by 4 FW-190 fighters, attempting to penetrate deep into Soviet airspace to carry out a bombing mission. Immediately, 4 Soviet P-63 King Cobra fighters entered combat status to intercept. Devyatayev and one of his teammates took the lead, diving from a high position to launch a fierce attack on the escorting FW-190 formation, and scored a kill instantly with full firepower. However, another P-63 fighter responsible for attacking the bomber was unfortunately hit by the tail gunner and lost control, leaving pilot Laren with no choice but to parachute. Immediately after, another P-63 was shot from behind by an enemy plane, instantly emitting black smoke and spiraling out of control. Facing 2 rapidly approaching enemy planes, Devyatayev pushed the stick forward to accelerate and dived sharply, thrillingly evading the bullets that could be fired at any moment. Eventually, Devyatayev and his teammates worked together to shoot down all 4 enemy planes. Immediately after, they pounced on the fleeing He 111 bomber. After successfully getting on the bomber's tail, a teammate immediately accelerated forward to attract and distract the bomber's gunner. To ensure a kill, Devyatayev took the risk of trying to get the plane closer before opening fire. But this decision made him regret it deeply.
Вот вам, суки, за кулю.
Although the bomber was successfully destroyed, Devyatayev's plane was unfortunately hit by bullets, and the fuel tank began to leak and catch fire. At first, he stubbornly tried to persist in flying to the Soviet-controlled area before parachuting, but the fire spread rapidly and burned more and more fiercely. With no other choice, he could only parachute over the German war zone. The violent impact upon landing caused Devyatayev to faint briefly. When he struggled to wake up, a large number of German troops had already surrounded him. The TT-33 pistol in his hand was obviously unable to stop them, and Devyatayev, who fainted again, was captured by the German army. Initially, Devyatayev was imprisoned in the Lodz POW camp in Poland. In the concentration camp, the first thing the Germans did was to offer generous conditions to make these Soviet pilots defect and serve Germany. But what shocked Devyatayev to the extreme was that the German officer who came to persuade him to surrender turned out to be his comrade Lauren, who had fought side by side with him just a month ago. Lauren took out a copy of Order Number 270, signed by Stalin on August 16, 1941. The order clearly stipulated that any commander or commissar who surrendered or was captured would be regarded as a deserter and executed upon returning home, while defecting to the German Air Force would not only allow them to continue flying fighters, but also grant them German citizenship. When Lauren, now a traitor, saw Devyatayev, a look of awkwardness immediately appeared on his face, and he quickly dismissed the other prisoners present. Lauren and Devyatayev hugged each other tightly, celebrating with mixed grief and joy that they were both still alive. Devyatayev whispered to Lauren, urging him to find a chance to escape with him, but Lauren firmly replied that he had already made his choice, and returning to their country would only have him branded as a traitor and executed. Late one night, Devyatayev and several prisoners hastily attempted to break out, but due to poor planning, they were soon caught by the German army. Lauren tried to step in to save Devyatayev, but Devyatayev was unwilling to be a traitor even then and fiercely denounced Lauren's actions. Seeing this, Lauren stopped trying to persuade him kindly. He suddenly drew his gun and killed a Soviet prisoner to cover up his inner shame and anger. Therefore, on September 15, 1944, Devyatayev, who attempted to escape, was designated as a death row inmate and sent to the notorious Sachsenhausen concentration camp. There, an old Soviet barber was shocked when he saw Devyatayev's identity card. The identity of a pilot coupled with the crime of organizing a prison break was destined to get him sent directly to the crematorium by the Nazis. Devyatayev's heart was like dead ash, but the old man admired the hero before him immensely.
А может, тогда рано тебя встречу? Герой силен, пока волосы с него не состригли.
Иди ты к черту.
Да нету тут ни черта, ни Господа. Один я за всех. Отдуваюсь.
Immediately, the barber devised a plan. He handed Devyatayev a new identity card, cleverly altering his identity to that of a fallen Ukrainian gunner named Grigory Kievchenko. Thus, Devyatayev, who narrowly escaped death, was transferred to the Karlshagen concentration camp on the island of Usedom in northern Germany to work as a laborer. Here, the prisoners were rudely awakened every morning by the roaring of a Soviet foreman named Sokolov. After washing haphazardly with cold water in the extreme cold, they were arranged a breakfast crawling with maggots. At dawn, they would be taken to the square and forcibly assigned the tasks to be completed for the day. On the first day, Devyatayev was assigned to work at an airfield near the Peenemünde Rocket Research Center. When he saw the Heinkel He 111 bomber slowly entering the hangar, he looked thoughtful. At night, all prisoners accepted Nazi re-education in the square as usual. Just then, a huge flash of fire suddenly tore through the sky. While everyone was dumbfounded, the fire made a strange turn in the air and rushed straight towards the concentration camp.
Diese Raketen wird uns früher oder später töten.
Hören Sie auf zu jammern, Hans. Wir bombardieren bereits London. Sehr bald fliegen unsere V-Raketen nach Moskau. Dann ist der Krieg zu Ende.
The prisoners injured by the rocket fragments did not receive treatment. Losing their labor ability, they were ruthlessly abandoned on the cold road to quietly wait for death to descend. The next morning, Devyatayev was responsible for moving the corpses of prisoners who had frozen to death in the bitter cold. At this time, a prisoner who was on good terms with him entrusted Devyatayev with his dying breath to find a man named Korj and take his place. With doubts, Devyatayev found Korj a few days later. It turned out that he was not the only one here longing for freedom. Korj and others had been secretly planning an escape plan. What surprised Devyatayev even more was that the fierce-looking foreman Sokolov was actually one of them. Subsequently, Devyatayev successfully joined them. Korj's plan was to steal a German speedboat by the river to escape, a plan that was immediately opposed by Devyatayev.
Гребем. А немцы такие стоят на берегу и смотрят.
Ну и что ты предлагаешь?
Угоним самолет.
Кто угонит-то? Ты что ли?
Я угоню. Летчики.
From then on, in order to hijack the He-111 bomber in the hangar, the 8 men attempting to escape would go to the airfield to work every day under Sokolov's arrangement. They used the short lunch break to race against time to deduce every link of hijacking the plane, even down to every precise movement.
Так, все уехали на обед. Следующий патруль будет через 3 минуты. У нас 180 секунд. Начали.
Считай.
1, 2,
Бахман на мне.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Ликвидировал.
8,
Я снимаю с него форму.
11, 12, 13, 14, 15,
Надо быстрее.
16,
Переоделся.
17,
Прячу тело.
18, 19,
Спрятали тело.
Кутергин ведет нас к самолету. Расстояние 50 метров.
56, 57, 58,
Ворота открыты.
59,
Заходим в ангар.
Успели.
Лопаты.
62, 63,
Это самолет.
Мы с Немченко подкатываем лестницу.
56.
Я начинаю снимать чехлы с двигателей.
Я поднимаюсь на крыло, снимаю чехол с трубы шапито.
Трубки пито. Дальше.
Я снимаю струбцину с рулей высоты.
Ты не успеешь. Надо больше времени.
102, 103, 104,
Теперь снял?
Вот сейчас
106,
снял.
Снимаю струбцинки с элеронов.
Дилеру находится. Проникаю в кабину.
176,
Я проверяю
177,
топливо и масло.
Снял чехлы.
Убираю лестницу.
178,
От винта время.
Practicing up to this point, Devyatayev suddenly realized a fatal problem. All the instruments and control switches of the German bomber were marked in German. Even if Sokolov could translate, it would definitely delay time, strictly. At their wits' end, Nemchenko suddenly remembered that there was the wreckage of a crashed bomber in the trench next to the airfield, and it seemed to be exactly the same as the one in the hangar. That wreckage must have various German labels on the instruments, and Devyatayev could also use the wreckage to familiarize himself with the cockpit layout in advance. The next day, Sokolov deliberately arranged for Devyatayev to work in the area closest to the wreckage. Later, he used the excuse of finding firewood for the German guards on duty to keep warm. After getting permission, Sokolov calmly assigned Devyatayev to go in search.
Хворост готов. Слева от самолета под сосной.
Devyatayev quickly slipped into the plane wreckage and immediately began to familiarize himself with the cockpit control panel and subsequently carefully pried off some key German identification plates from the dashboard. However, just at this moment, the German guard walked over. Hearing a strange noise from the direction of the wreckage, he immediately raised his gun to alert and approached cautiously.
Действие hier.
Mann, wo warst du so lange? Ich warte seit nach 15 Minuten. Geh an die Arbeit.
Да-да. Рыжки.
With the help of the stolen identification plates, Devyatayev recited those obscure German words and abbreviations day and night under Sokolov's translation. However, an accident happened. The Ukrainian prisoner Vili sneakily discovered Devyatayev's abnormal behavior and the iron plates hidden in the dormitory. That night, while no one was paying attention, he secretly snitched to the German army. Not long after, a large number of guards rushed into the dormitory fiercely to conduct a raid. Unprepared, Devyatayev could only risk stuffing the iron plates under the bedding and then hurriedly stood in line to assemble. Fortunately, the person responsible for checking the bedding happened to be the foreman Sokolov, who was trusted by the German commander. He felt the identification plate beneath the bedding and, in a split second, switched it out. Immediately, he held up an exquisite Soviet badge and claimed with a fierce look that he had found contraband. He thought punishment was inevitable, but even more fortunately, the German commander actually liked this exquisite trophy very much. He confiscated the badge in the name of contraband and took it away, without pursuing any responsibility against Devyatayev.
На завтра остаешься без пайка.
At noon the next day, Devyatayev, who had already memorized the key German labels by heart, decided to implement the escape plan immediately while the guards were having lunch. However, just at this moment, the air raid siren sounded shrilly at the airfield, and immediately the U.S. bomber group whistled in. Facing the bombs falling like rain, Devyatayev could only desperately dodge the bombs and pray not to hit the bomber in the hangar.
Только не в ангар. Прошу, только не в ангар.
However, things didn't go as planned. Two P-51 Mustang fighters, each carrying a bomb, dove straight toward the hangar. The moment the bomb fell accurately onto the hangar roof, Devyatayev's heart sank violently. Immediately, his vision began to flicker. Mentally and physically exhausted, he thought his only hope of escape was shattered. However, fortunately, the anticipated devastating explosion did not happen. The bomb dropped by the P-51 turned out to be a dud. Immediately, Devyatayev claimed to the German officer that he knew how to defuse bombs and volunteered to dismantle it. Facing the German officer's doubts, he hurriedly claimed that he just wanted a little more ration to fill his stomach or rest a while longer. A massive 250-kilogram bomb was dangerously stuck on the steel frame of the hangar roof, crumbling. It could fall and hit the He-111 bomber below at any time, triggering catastrophic consequences. Devyatayev climbed up carefully and tried to disarm the impact fuse of the bomb. However, at this critical moment, the bomb suddenly slid down. With quick eyes and hands, he threw himself forward regardless of his own safety and hugged the falling bomb tightly, stabilizing it in a thrilling manner. Seeing that Devyatayev, who was holding the heavy bomb with his bare hands, could not spare a hand to remove the fuse, another brave prisoner hurriedly climbed up to help.
Что дальше?
Аккуратно откручивай обтекатель.
Так, дальше.
Вот видишь стопор?
Да.
Вот откручивай его одной ручкой, второй придерживай взрыватель. Аккуратненько. Вот и все.
Finally, under Devyatayev's calm command, the firing pin of the bomb was successfully removed. Immediately after, several prisoners worked together to slowly lift this death bomb down safely, completely resolving the crisis. Afterwards, the German officer made an exception and allowed Devyatayev's group to rest early and generously rewarded Devyatayev with a double portion of lunch. However, when Devyatayev returned to the dormitory with the food, the informer, Vili, jeered again, inciting him by falsely accusing Devyatayev of saving the German bomber to please the Nazis, and that stealing the German labels was to join the German Air Force in the future. Facing Vili's malicious slander and the danger that could ruin the escape plan, fear and anger instantly swallowed Devyatayev, and he pounced on Vili, knocking him to the ground. At this moment, with blood-red eyes, he completely forgot the consequences. No one could stop his determination to return home. In extreme hatred, Devyatayev actually stuffed the food in his hand fiercely into Vili's mouth and smothered him to death alive. As a result, Devyatayev was subjected to brutal military stick punishment by the German army. This beating made him almost unable to stand and walk. That day, while working at the airfield, Devyatayev suddenly saw several German officers arriving in a Junkers Ju-52 transport plane, and standing beside the aircraft was none other than the traitor Larin. The purpose of his trip was precisely to track down and capture Devyatayev, who had swapped identity cards. At the identification scene, Devyatayev couldn't stop trembling all over. He knew that today would be his death date. Larin, who had become a traitor, would never allow himself any chance to return home alive in order to cover up his capture and his own treasonous behavior forever. He would definitely identify Devyatayev accurately. At this life-and-death juncture, Nemchenko, standing next to Devyatayev, made an astonishing move. He suddenly spoke out clearly and loudly to Devyatayev, giving him his home address as if he were entrusting him with something. Immediately, he suddenly pounced on Laren, hysterically cursing him as a traitor, and the scene instantly fell into chaos. Taking the opportunity, other prisoners immediately swapped the positions of Devyatayev in the second row with the prisoners in the first row who had already been identified. Eventually, Nemchenko, who attempted to attack the German officer, was forcibly dragged away and shot on the spot, while Devyatayev was lucky enough to escape Laren's identification. Without delay, at noon that day, the 7 men, including Devyatayev, Sokolov, and Korj, immediately began the operation. According to the established plan, Sokolov attacked the guard first. However, the guard was much stronger and more difficult to deal with than expected. After 4 people worked together to besiege him and spent precious time, they finally subdued him.
Домой полетели, я летчик.
Пошли. Давай.
Immediately, everyone ran towards the hangar. Upon arrival, they quickly dispersed and raced against time to complete their respective pre-takeoff preparations according to the previous rehearsal. Accompanying the roar of the bomber engine, Devyatayev was excited to the extreme. Their careful rehearsals seemed to be showing initial results. However, when the tense and breathless Devyatayev released the brakes, the bomber didn't move an inch. Sokolov suddenly realized that there might be wheel locks on the bomber's wheels. Helplessly, 2 prisoners had to jump off the plane quickly to pry off the wheel chocks. A delay of 1 second could mean death for them. The intense pressure almost suffocated them. After releasing the brakes again, the bomber finally slowly slid out of the hangar and moved towards the runway. The guards in the watchtower and the resting German soldiers noticed the plane moving but didn't become suspicious, clearly assuming that whoever was in the cockpit was one of their own. As the speed gradually increased, Devyatayev decisively pulled the control stick to prepare for takeoff. However, at this time, a fatal problem appeared again. No matter how hard he pulled the control stick back, the nose refused to lift. The cabin instantly exploded with chaos, and everyone even began to doubt Devyatayev's identity as a pilot. Seeing that the bomber was about to hit the fence at the end of the runway, Devyatayev used all his strength to slam the control stick. The huge bomber immediately made a thrilling drift movement amidst harsh friction sounds, barely turning around to avoid the destruction of the plane and the death of the people. Meanwhile, reminded by Laren, the German army woke up as if from a dream. A group of prisoners was trying to escape with a plane. The harsh alarm sounded shrilly immediately, and a large number of guards rushed towards the runway like madmen.
Gibt es dort einen Lageplan der Abflussrampen? Sag ihm doch, da ist alles drin. Wir müssen ihnen den Weg abschneiden. Wenn sie abheben, das ist das Ende. Sind Gefangene!
Meanwhile, Laren drove a fuel tanker and stepped on the gas pedal to rush to the end of the runway, then parked it horizontally on the runway in a vain attempt to block Devyatayev's escape route. However, at this moment, with the strenuous assistance of his partners, Devyatayev finally pulled the heavy nose up fiercely. The Heinkel He 111 bomber soared over the fuel tanker and successfully took off.
Улетела.
The crowd who successfully took off erupted in the ecstasy of surviving a disaster. However, just the moment they subconsciously released the control stick, the huge bomber, which lost its trim, uncontrollably raised its head. To their shock, it performed a breathtaking cobra maneuver in midair, clearly showing that the elevators were still refusing to respond. Everyone screamed and pushed the control stick forward desperately again. Fortunately, the nose was finally suppressed and began to correct. But unfortunately, the plane then fell into a dangerous dive. At the critical moment, a flash of lightning passed through Devyatayev's mind, recalling the conversation when he first met Laren in Germany. In the conversation, he had unintentionally complained about the elevator of German planes.
Я когда первый раз залез, думаю, где триммер руля высоты, ищу. Там хитрость. Он внизу, под сиденьем, с правой стороны.
Под сиденьем с правой стороны! Вот он триммер! Бляха-муха! С правой стороны! Держу! Легче пошла! Все, теперь долетим.
On the return voyage, everyone's tense nerves finally relaxed, and long-lost smiles from the bottom of their hearts bloomed on their faces. However, just then, Laren's cold and familiar voice suddenly came from the bomber's radio. Devyatayev's heart shivered. He suddenly realized that Laren had already driven a fighter plane to catch up. Immediately, he instructed several partners to go to the various machine gun positions of the bomber to prepare for battle. Subsequently, Laren, who had gone completely crazy, drove a Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighter and launched a fierce attack on the bomber like a maggot attached to a bone. The prisoners on the bomber had long hated this traitor to the bone. They operated the MG-15 aircraft machine guns to fight back with all their might, and the screaming of the machine guns instantly tore through the sky. In the continuing dogfight, the cunning Laren quickly hid in the shooting blind spot of the bomber's belly machine gun and opened fire fiercely, directly hitting one of the bomber's engines, and flames instantly rose. Looking at the burning engine, Laren let out a ferocious laugh in the cockpit. Then he immediately kept the fighter parallel to the bomber. Holding the winning hand, he hypocritically persuaded Devyatayev to surrender again. Devyatayev knew Laren's sinister intentions well. Ignoring Laren completely, he pushed the control stick fiercely to make a diving action in an attempt to shake him off. Seeing that persuasion was ineffective, Laren immediately bit the tail of the bomber ferociously and strafed wildly. However, fate played a trick on him. The machine gun of the Bf-109 actually jammed at this time. Seeing the enemy plane's fire interrupted, the bomber's belly gunner immediately seized this fleeting opportunity and unleashed a burst of firepower at the Bf-109 below.
Коля, хорош. Линия фронта рядом, давай домой, Коля.
Да куда я полечу, Миша? Кого я там обрадую? Отца? Новой формой дороже сытой.
Полетели домой. Мы скажем, что ты с нами был, Коля. Нас простят, Коля. Слышишь? Коля, слышишь меня?
Слышу я тебя.
At this time, Laren, who believed he had no way out, made his final madness. He actually piloted the Bf-109 and, disregarding everything, rammed it straight into the top of the bomber's fuselage, attempting to destroy the bomber.
Ваша мама пришла. Молочка принесла. Творитесь, отопритесь.
The repeated violent impacts shook the entire bomber incessantly. At the nose, the gunner reacted with godlike speed. He immediately removed the jammed machine gun, thrust the muzzle out of the fuselage from the broken window, and then pulled the trigger at the belly of the Bf-109, which was close at hand. Dense bullets instantly caused the Bf-109 to emit billowing thick smoke and begin to fall out of control. Finally, Laren, who did not intend to parachute, made a final request to Devyatayev.
Миша, я падаю. Девятаев, слышишь меня? Ты прости меня за все. Фаю береги. Миша! Миша! Отцу не говори.
Не скажу.
This movie is based on true events. Devyatayev eventually flew back to Soviet airspace with his 10 companions. However, they were flying a German warplane. The unprepared Soviet Union fired at them with anti-aircraft artillery in a state of war. To prove their innocence, Devyatayev did not fight back but successfully crash-landed on the snow amidst artillery fire. After landing, they were mistaken for spies sent by the German army. They were arrested one by one and interrogated. Even though they argued repeatedly, they still failed to gain recognition from the Soviet troops. He and 2 other officers were sentenced to life imprisonment for treason, while the other 7 were sent to the Soviet front line to continue fighting. Although Devyatayev provided a large amount of German Air Force data and V-2 missile intelligence, he was still regarded as a criminal. Therefore, he could only rely on manual labor for a living for many years afterward. However, fate did not abandon them after all. It was just that their day of vindication came a little late. It was not until 1957 that the chairman of the Soviet space program rehabilitated these soldiers who returned from Germany, and even awarded Devyatayev the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. After rehabilitation, Devyatayev personally wrote a book telling the story of the escape of him and 9 other companions. This book is titled Escape from Hell. Despite the twists and turns and misunderstandings, Devyatayev finally drew a relatively perfect period for his life.